A guten Erev Shabbos. About 15 years or so ago, when my brother-in-law, Sharona's next oldest brother, and his family were getting ready to go on Aliyah, we all went to a big celebratory send-off sponsored by Nefesh B'Nefesh at the old Jewish theater on Bathurst Street. There were a good number of jokes told that day. Two of them stuck in my mind. One was by a former Torontonian who had gone on Aliyah some years before, and he'd come back to encourage others in making their move to Israel. So in his speech, he started with, "I'll never forget that feeling of getting on the plane in Toronto, leaving the land of my birth, where I had always been Jewish, but never truly felt at home. And then, when the plane landed, all of a sudden, everything changed. We were in a place where Jews at every level of government and society and music and culture and economics and commerce ran the country and truly made it their home." But as it happened, we were only in New York for a few hours just to change planes and catch the El Al flight that would take us to Israel. So that was one. The other one was just a little older, and it hit home a little bit more, and it's also very shayach, very connected to our parsha. This week, the portion of Shelach, sending the spies into the land of Israel to search out the conditions of the land. It goes like this. After 120 years, a fellow learns that his time on earth is up, and he goes to meet the Beit Din Shel Maila, the heavenly court. They question him, they examine him, they look over his record, and they tell him, this almost never happens, but it is what it is. Your record is exactly perfectly balanced. You have exactly the same amount of transgressions as mitzvahs. Your basket on either side, they weigh each other out. So really, you can choose whatever you like. You can have heaven or hell, totally up to you, whichever you choose. Guy's stunned. He didn't know such a thing could happen. He doesn't know how to decide. So he says, "Could I possibly take a look before I make a commitment?" They say, "Sure, take a look, make yourself at home." So he's right next door to the main entrance of heaven, so he peeks in. What does he see? Bunch of long tables, bunch of guys with long beards, bent over huge volumes of the Talmud, studying. He asks the guard, just double checking, "This is heaven, right?" The guy says, "Yep, sure is." He says, "Not quite what I had in mind. Can I take a peek at hell? Just to get a sense." They say, "Sure." They put him on the elevator, goes down, his ears pop, and he braces himself as the door opens. It's a party, good music, lots of food and drink, dancing, everyone has a smile. The climate is perfect. It's like the Bahamas, sand, palm trees. It looks pretty good, to be honest. He asks a few people, "So how do you like it down here?" And they say, "Oh, love it. It's great. I could stay here for eternity." So he goes back to the heavenly court and he says, "Well, I think I made my decision. I'm going to choose hell." So they say, "Coming right up." They put him back on the elevator. He heads down. His ears pop again. The doors slide open. It's like a Renaissance painting of the Last Judgment. There's devils. There's fire. There's boiling hot cauldrons, flames, the whole 9 yards. So he finds a customer service representative quickly, and he says to him, "Hey, what's this? What's going on here? When I came to look around, it wasn't like this at all. It seemed like paradise. Now it really looks like hell. It lives up to the name." So they explained to him exactly. When you came here before, you came as a tourist. Now you've come to live here. It looks a little bit different, doesn't it? That was actually the joke that the Sachnut representative used to tell the families as they were gearing up for their move to Israel. But anyway, tourists is exactly what our spies were in this week's Parsha, Shelach. Shelach, or Shelach Lacha, some people call it, means send or send for yourself. God says to Moshe, "Send for yourself scouts to go and reconnoiter the land of Israel. See how it is." We call them meraglim, spies, from regel, to go on foot, even though the Parsha, the Torah itself, doesn't use that term. It says they are going latur es haaretz. They're going to seek out the land, to scan the land, take a peek. It has nearly the same meaning, I think, in modern Hebrew. A tayar is a tourist, not a citizen, not a permanent resident, someone just there for a short stay to see the sights. Take a few photos for the folks back home, and that's it. Remember, at this point in the Torah, Bnei Yisrael were actually just a few days away from entering into the land of Israel. Few more days and they would be home finally. But they were ambivalent about it. Number of reasons are given. One that makes a lot of sense to me anyway is that the Jewish people had just finished 210 years of hard work, servitude, slavery to Pharaoh in Egypt. We'd been in the desert for not quite a year and a half, getting ready to receive the Torah, learning how to build the Mishkan, learning all the laws and all that. And part of what we learned is that when we would go into the land of Israel, it was more hard work ahead, settling the land, going to battle against the inhabitants if that proved necessary, and then setting up flocks and fields and tending farms and planting and harvesting and tithing and winnowing and all that hard work. Now, how were we sustained for that year and a half since leaving Egypt? Once the matzah that we brought with us ran out, we received manna from heaven and drank from Miriam's well. And there's a midrash that explained that the clouds of glory cleaned our clothes. So we save money on dry cleaning too. Now, if you're traveling business class with all you can eat and drink, and they press your suit while you wait, who'd want to go into the land and get your feet dirty and your hands dirty and schmutz under your fingernails, all to fulfill what God told Adam, by the sweat of your brow shall you eat your bread? Who said anything about sweating? I thought we were free now. I thought we're done with hard work. So this negative attitude affected the thinking of the scouts. They weren't so interested in the proposition. They sort of took it what they witnessed and they manufactured a little panic around it. They whipped up some street protests, sprinkled a little fake news over the mix, and right away Moses had a rebellion on his hands. Not the last one we'll encounter in the book of Numbers, by the way. Stay tuned. Now, every misrepresentation, I don't want to say lie, because it really wasn't a lie, every deception has a kernel of truth to it. When the scouts came back with their report, they first did what they were supposed to, which was just report on what they saw. They said the people are big, the produce is big, and that's the story. Now, if they would have stopped there, then probably 2 weeks later, the Jewish people would have been in our homeland happily forever after, perhaps even with Moshe Rabbeinu as our king, prime minister, president, whatever, and that would have been the end of that. But the scouts could not hold themselves back from editorializing, putting a little spin on it. After they said what they saw, they said, we'll never be able to make it. It's too much of a challenge for us. It's not going to happen. Now, they were scouts, remember, not prophets. Prophets say, in the name of God, what is and what isn't going to happen, what could happen, should happen, whatever. Scouts are supposed to report, and that's the end of it. Not editorialize, not prejudge, not make any strategic decisions. That's not their job. If God says we're going into the land to settle it, to conquer it, and to make it into a Jewish state, then that's what we're going to do. We are the people that overcomes the odds. But no, the predictions and the fear-based projections of the spies, call it fake news if that helps you put it in context, led to panic among the Jewish people. What were people saying? It's impossible. We're going down in defeat. The challenge is too much for us. Hadn't even happened yet, but they already knew how the story ends. And you know, of course, that without confidence, it's very hard to accomplish anything. So a report grew into a dire prediction, grew into a panic, grew into a national rebellion. At one point in the Parsha, things were so out of hand that we thought we'd just turn around, go back to Egypt, and give up. Can you imagine that kind of desperation? What was the problem? No more than lack of commitment, lack of belief, lack of self-esteem, lack of confidence that we could get through whatever challenges we had to endure to get where we're going. So in many ways, things have changed, and in some ways, things stay the same. 3,000 years later, we are still inhabiting and conquering and settling that land, the land of Israel, the Jewish national homeland that God promised to us all the way back then. A lot of times we have confidence, determination, we have faith, and sometimes we don't, and that holds us back and slows us down. The Jewish national project, whether we live in Israel or Canada or wherever Jews live, and we've lived in some strange places over the centuries, is making the world worthy of being redeemed. That's why we fight for the rights of others, not just our own. That's why we're so sympathetic to the underdog. Time and again, over and over, you'll find Jews deeply involved with struggles for civil rights around the world in the modern age, and certainly in our times. The Parsha asks us the question, what is our commitment? What's our level of engagement? How dedicated are we to our goals? In Israel, you can ask this question. In Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, how much are we sticking together? and keeping our eyes on what's really important, not giving in to whatever the latest panic is. Within our Kehillah, we can even ask the question still. For the first few weeks of lockdown and quarantine and closure, okay, a few days, a few weeks. Those days and weeks stretch into months and more months. Maybe it's time for us all to recheck our commitments and our dedication. When's the last time we tuned in for the L'chaim on Thursday? Called or emailed another person in our Kehillah just to say hi, keep in touch, tell you I'm thinking of you. We could all use a call to say hi, and I'm thinking of you. So this week, promise yourself you'll reach out to another person, maybe two people that you haven't talked to in a while, and see how they are, and tell them you're thinking of them. If you need help, give us a call in the office. We're ready to help everyone stay connected and stay together. Caring for one another, staying connected, l'chaim's online, learning, gathering for interesting talks about things that are important to us. That's not just tourists, that's not just casual, that's the real thing. That's the meaning of Kehillah, a community, a congregation, a chevra. The very last part of this week's parsha is the mitzvah of tzitzis, to put them on the corners of our garments and remind ourselves of the mitzvot. Why? Why do we have to do that? Isn't it enough just to keep the mitzvahs in mind? I'll think about them. Because we're all human beings, and we rely on reminders, we rely on visual cues and signs to help us remember and make us think of who we are and what we do and what we're committed to. A mezuzah, a yarmulke, a tzitzis, a menorah, whatever the signs are in our corner of the world, think of them and remember what it's really all about. Don't get sidetracked, don't get distracted like the spies in this week's parsha. Don't get caught up in editorializing and deciding, prophesying what's going to be the future. And for sure, don't fall for fake news and don't panic. Just keep our vision focused on what's good and what's true and what's eternal and holy, and we will get through this together. Like the Jews in the desert, it may take us a little bit longer than we'd thought, but we will get to the promised land. Good Shabbos.